the other part of this whole debate on deforestation is who's going to be the one monitoring it, and it looks likely that the Global Environment Fund, GEF, is going to have a role in this, which is a sort of a part of the World Bank, and a lot of the developing nations are not so keen on this, and the European Union has been pushing it. So that looks like a done deal on deforestation. So you would think that having such one of these Bretton Woods institutions, a sort of the key instruments of US power and of neoliberalism, having them involved in any way in the developing world in protecting forests where they're renowned for destroying forests and for exploitation, might not be a great idea. However, there is a review body that's going to be able to overlook this with developing nations on board, so there's some sort of review process. Australia ratified, which was superb news. I mean, that was a really good start to the conference. But throughout the process, their position has been changing, and we've been uncertain about whether they supported this sort of broad range for a Bali roadmap, including a 25 to 40% reduction in carbon emissions on 1990 levels by 2020 for all developed countries. Australia suggested they support that, and then stated flatly that they wouldn't, and they won Fossil of the Day by the Climate Action Network a couple of times, and they in general, I'd say they failed to capitalise on a leadership position they could have, and but they have become less negative than they were. They're not obstructionist, they're just you know, they're not really pushing they're not leadership anywhere, they're just following slowly behind. I already mentioned about the idea of 2 degrees as a sort of target area, and this is when you look at the Bali climate talks, it's quite easy to despair at the bureaucracy they have, because when you look at the process, and then you think, what is it reasonable to expect? And then you look at what's been achieved, you think, that's quite reasonable. But the problem is, that's more, what's happened is tells you more about the process than, you know, how action is related to the real world. So the real world might, you know, the science is telling us one thing about urgency, whereas the process has kind of got its own pace because it's so complex and it's so convoluted and there's so many people involved. But one of the positive things I'd say is that this idea of 2 degree limit is starting to become more widespread, and it's like you need to start with your temperature, and then you have to say, what does that mean in terms of CO2 concentrations? Then you have to go for emissions. And as everyone's starting to agree on the temperature, then the next step down would seem to be what this is in gases, but the next real discussion is going to be what this means in terms of actual emissions by country. Now, there is an easy way to solve this whole spectrum, you know, the linear argument which we should have been having a long time ago, and that's called contraction and convergence. Which cuts out all the bullshit, and it makes everything an awful lot simpler, and it means that you don't need 12,000 delegates. It's a very simple idea based on equal per capita emissions, contracting globally and converging by nation, by people. So there are some positive signs that we're heading, the science in terms of what that means for targets is going to become more and more prominent, and the German government have taken on this idea of doing their part based on contraction and convergence, and their targets for 2050 of, I think, an 88% cut on 1990 levels reflect this. So if this sort of idea can spread, then you know, it's a positive sign that this is starting to happen anyway. Switzerland has proposed a review of a clean development mechanism, which the Climate Action Network have supported, and their quote, given the wide range and seriousness of the criticisms the CDM has attracted. So there's quite a significant range of issues involved there, and it's and to the best of my knowledge, this this review is going to take place. But if you know differently, let me know. I couldn't actually track down reports on whether this had been confirmed. Progress has been made on adaptation. I noticed, I wasn't sure how significant this is because for various announcements of funds by countries and occasionally by groups of countries, but how solid and really significant and how much difference they're actually going to make in the end is difficult to tell. But I looked up the website of the International Institute on Environment and Development, which is a London-based group, does really good work in this area, and they're involved with development and adaptation days at the conference. And they had a quite a strongly worded statement about the fact that this is a really good start towards taking adaptation seriously. One of the parts of it is actually setting up a body to look at this problem on a permanent basis, and my impression is that having such an institution which is going to fight the corner of adaptation is quite a valuable thing in its own right. So obviously the work of securing the funding and getting the structure set up properly is still to come, but a good start has been made in the idea that such a body needs to exist. Technology transfer has been getting a lot of attention. It's managed to find its way onto into a variety of acronym named bodies, and hopefully this is the start of some really significant movement on this issue. There's always great rhetoric about technology transfer. You look at any sort of policy document on climate negotiations and technology transfer is in there, and it's actually quite contentious amongst many of the social movements from the south, because they reckon this technology is going to be carbon capture and storage and nuclear power and such ideas. But hopefully something significant is going to happen on this as well. So those were some of the main points on interesting things that are happening at Bali, things that seem to be going forward, and we'll just have to wait until this is hopefully resolved on Saturday, and we'll see what we're looking for in the post Kyoto roadmap.